Can you guys hear okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
Can everybody hear?
I can hear.
Oh, good.
Hi, I can hear.
I can hear you, so we'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll get started. I like it when it works. Okay, so it looks like we have 6 people on, and my clock says 7, so I want to go ahead and open it up since you guys were here on time. And then if people join us and have questions, we can recap. So I think our agenda items for tonight are to talk about data analysis assignment number 1, which is the meta-analysis. And then I am also open to chatting about the next assignments, which are the outline for your proposals and then the details for your proposals. So if that sounds like an okay agenda, we can get started. And I just want to make sure everybody has had a chance to look at data analysis assignment number 1 on the meta-analysis, and then looked at the worksheets and the Excel sheet so that you can see you plug in the numbers and it will actually calculate those effect sizes so that you can combine for that assignment. So any questions about any of that?
I did have a question. Do you, when we submit the assignment, do you want us to put like the table in APA format and answer the question, or do you just want us to put the questions in the Excel sheet and submit it? What's your preference?
Yeah, there are no rules around format for this. Okay. And you can plug it in however you want. Okay. I just want the answers to those questions and then show me how you calculated it. So that's a very good question. For the proposal, we're going to need it in APA format. And the tables and everything need to be APA format. For these analysis assignments, it's did you analyze it correctly and can you interpret it, i.e. answer the questions. But complete sentences and spelling and grammar are important, but no format.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great question.
So for our calculations, you just want the copy of that worksheet, right? Or do you want us to spell it all out in the paper again?
No. So you, let's see, how's the best way to, you're going to have to do the calculations for each study independently and then plug that in. So let's see, I don't know how to answer that question without giving away the answers.
I know. Well, my plan was just to attach the worksheet, and then on a Word, I had the question, was going to answer the questions.
That's fine. It's going to take more than one worksheet. How about that for an answer?
Okay. I'm a little confused now, but yeah, because there was only one I had thought after following yours, unless I did it wrong. I'll connect with you offline because
Okay.
there's only one that I thought I had to erase.
Yeah. As
So
long,
just
as
do
long
that.
yeah,
Okay.
you can't just plug things into one worksheet and
No.
get, yeah. Yeah, but yes, that's fine.
I'll connect with you probably tomorrow or after this because, like I said, I have another question on something on
Okay.
it. So.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. And did everybody see the example and walk through the steps?
Mhm.
And then you found the blank worksheet. So if you just walk through the steps, I think you should be, it should be pretty clear. Then make sure you do the assigned reading so that you're interpreting things correctly. But this is really a very useful tool as you begin to do your own review of the literature around your topics of interest. You may very well find that you want to do this in your review of the literature. If there's been a significant number of studies done, I mean, really, even if there's been a couple of studies done and nobody's done a synthesis or a meta-analysis and they're measuring the variables the same way, this would be a really powerful way to combine those studies to say, here's what we know and here's what we don't know. And that's why I'm going to move in this direction. So you may, as you pull the studies in for your own area of interest, decide to do this in as a background for your dissertation studies. So as we try to do with most of the courses in this program, we're hoping this is really useful to get you to build toward the steps of your own dissertation. So that's the point of this. And so we really want you to learn how to combine the findings of these multiple studies if you end up, finding that there's some studies with similar measures that you could go ahead and combine. So,
Bonnie,
yeah.
I thought your video was really helpful, watching you walk through it, but I just got stuck on how to use the chi-square table.
So you come up with a value, and then you need to go to the Courtney and Watkins book and look at the table. And then, yep.
Okay.
And then that will tell you, once you find the value, then that tells you where it falls. So it's going to help you with answering the rest of those questions.
So you go from like the specific degrees of freedom and then the 0.05 or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
And see if it,
right.
what the number is. Okay.
And once you find the value and plug it in, then it should tell you where you're at with those findings. Is that
if they're greater or less than 0.05.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of those tables in that book for that reason.
Okay.
There's a whole appendix as you just held up. Any other questions about the analysis assignment?
I do have one question.
Yes.
Regarding the data analysis calculator, The last part is the file drawer analysis, and it tells you how many studies you need more to invalidate the study, to invalidate the results.
Right.
So in case, for example, you get 1 or 2, does that mean that the results of your studies are not valid and you need this much of studies to invalidate the studies? I just didn't get exactly.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what it means is that if you get 2, let's say 2 studies, that means that if there are 2 unpublished studies in somebody's file drawer, that's where it gets the name, and they didn't get published because they had negative findings, which many times is the case, but that those 2 studies showed this intervention didn't work, then that could invalidate what you found in combining the studies you combined. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it would only take 2 studies with the opposite findings to make this not significant.
I see.
It tells you, so if you get a number that says it would take 50 unpublished studies to change what we believe about the findings, then that tells you you can be pretty confident in what you came up with. But if you get a 1 or a 2, it's only going to take 1 or 2 studies that haven't been published that had negative findings, then you're a little less sure that this is, a really reasonable finding to be sure of. Does that make sense?
Yes. So what, for example, if during our literature review, we find like different results, some of them are positive and some are negative. I mean, when you do the calculation, do you just count the positive results or you put both of them?
You should be able to calculate the effect sizes that will be positive and negative and then combine them. And then that, again, if you have positives and negatives, that is going to tell you when you combine them, then the effect size combined is going to be lower for the intervention. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So these are 2 separate steps. So the first one is combining the studies to say, do we think this is an effective intervention? Then the second one is, how sure are we, and how many unpublished studies with contrary findings would it take to negate what I am concluding here?
So is there like a set point where we can say, for example, if we get this much of studies, then, our results are invalid or our results are?
The best way to describe it, because this is all about statistics and probability, the best way to describe it is to use those specific effect sizes and then the file drawer test. Those are the ways that will help you decide, and then it's up to you as the consumer of those studies and the consumer of the meta-analysis to make a decision about how you want to use that information. So there's really no magic cutoff point. But, it's sort of logical that if you don't have a very powerful intervention and you have a file drawer test that says it only takes 1 with contrary findings to negate it, then you need to do more work. We don't have the answer to that particular question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Shall we shift to the, go ahead.
That's what I was going to ask. Is there a question on the outline?
Okay, I had actually printed off those rubrics. Let me grab them. Okay. So the outline is only 5 points, but I want you to pick some guideline for publication from, remember during the intensive week, we kind of took a look at all of those different guidelines depending on the type of study that you're going to do. You can use, if you're doing an RCT, the consort guidelines, whatever study you're, and it does have to be quantitative, obviously, for a class, but use those guidelines to come up with what are the components that go into this proposal. And then obviously you're not going to write up results and discussion and conclusion because it's the proposal, but you'll use that to guide you in what all the components are going to be. And then you're going to provide an outline. And this can be very bulleted outline format. This does not need to be, I really don't feel like you even need complete sentences for this. Obviously use spell check and grammar check, but it's basically an outline of what you're going to put in the proposal. So you're going to have a purpose, you're going to have a research question, you're going to have methods, you're going to talk about your measures. In your background section, you probably want to do what we know about the problem and what we know about any theoretical framework or model that's going to guide you. And then when you do the measures, how they link to that theory or model would be a good idea. And then I think we already said measures, and then your plan for analysis. So that's kind of what goes into your outline. And in addition to the headings, go ahead and plug in. So plug in the question, plug in the framework or the theory, plug in your proposed measures. And I encourage you to go ahead and plug in the analysis. You don't have to describe all of it, but if you give me, a phrase of what you're planning to do, the biggest problem in the past from students with this assignment is a mismatch between the purpose, the research question, the methods, and the analysis. And as we've said in here before, I'm really going to be looking for alignment with that. So if your research question is what is the difference between the control group and the intervention group, then in your analysis, I'm going to want to see some kind of analytic plan that looks for differences, not correlations, not associations, but looking for differences. So so I'd go ahead and put those details in on this little 5-point outline so that I can give you feedback, so that when you hand the proposal in, which is worth a lot more points, then you have the opportunity to catch any problems. So questions about that?
use the guidelines, and I wasn't sure. I'm just must be confusing that with something. Is that what did you mean by that? When you
You know, when you look at the consort guidelines, like if you're doing an RCT, the consort guidelines go through what you need in there to be published. That's just a guide to help you not miss any of the components. So for example, human subjects, the measures,
I know. I remember now because we use those even when we were writing our papers too.
Right.
I just couldn't remember. There are guidelines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So really that proposal outline is an opportunity to get feedback so that you can get full credit for the proposal. And then
I have a question for you. Do we have to use the question we decide intensives week, or if it's changed,
nope.
Still utilize this data, can we change it?
Yep, you can change it. The only, the only qualifier around this is it has to be a quantitative study.
Yeah.
But the other thing I encourage you not to do, although some students have done it and done fine with it, I usually suggest you use something, we're just doing Quant 1 here. So we're talking about the simpler designs, and we're talking about, these simpler kinds of analyses in this. If you're going to be doing logistic regression and modeling and that sort of thing, that stuff comes in Quant 2. So I usually suggest that you propose something that's a little simpler that goes along with the content covered in this class. Having said that, I have in the past had multiple students who had already decided what they were going to do for their dissertation. It was more complicated. They'd met with their faculty mentor, and they handed in papers that were just fine. So I don't know where you guys all are at with your dissertation plans, and if you're down the road and already have it all figured out, and you want to do that, that's fine. I just usually suggest, because we haven't gone into and will not go into the modeling and the more complicated regression, that you sort of stick with the analysis that's covered in this class. But if you have questions as you're ironing all that out, feel free to email me. And Tamara, as you're looking at this, if you want to approach it from more of a DMP project perspective, that is fine too. That is totally fine. So feel free to, if you want to run something by me, go right ahead, but it is totally fine with me if you gear it toward your project.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the research proposal rubric also has all the components outlined for you. That one's worth 20 points. So I would strongly encourage that you spend the time to really do a good job with this, because it's worth a lot. And the rubric is really pretty thorough on exactly how many points for each section. You're going to notice that there's 10 points for the methods, 1, 2, and 3 points, 3 for your background and 10 for the methods. Obviously, I care a lot about the methods section, so make sure that you get all of those components in there. So you're going to tell me a lot about the subjects, a lot about the materials, so your instruments and your reliability and validity of those, your procedures, so the design and the details of the test and treatment, and data collection method, and your timetable, and the data management and analysis. The other part that I'm going to just say one more time, people lose points on frequently, is if there's a mismatch between what you're saying your research question is, and the method you're proposing and the analysis. So just be really clear that you've made a good decision around each of those, and that they flow. The other area where you could run into potential problems is if you propose a theory and then your measures don't match that theory. So I was trying to think of a good example of that to share with you guys. And I think you could say, if we thought, if you had a theory that that a person's substance use was influenced by anxiety and depression, and you did not measure anxiety and depression in your methods, that would be a weakness, because you proposed a theory and then didn't measure those components. So there's just an example of how you want to make sure the theory informs what you're going to measure.
I was just going to say that Karen Sousa talked about this in our Caring Science class.
I love that. I hope we're saying
whenever Max met. But she said, you're saying the same thing. She said like, so I had to present my conceptual, like 4 conceptual models, different ones that kind of fit with my my question or whatever. And the one that I kind of am most leaning towards and really liked has these very specific concepts, right? These like 4 concepts of trust building. And she said what you just said. She said, so what you want to do is take that model and those 4 concepts of trust, so compassionate stranger or like effective listener or whatever these concepts are, and then the tool that you're going to use to measure trust, you want to literally link those concepts up with the tool, so that if your theory says we're measuring X, Y, and Z, the tool matches and measures X, Y, and Z, and they aren't necessarily, the tool's made up by some people way over here and the theory's made up by people way over here, and we have to kind of make them match up.
Right. Good. Well, I love it when your faculty are on the same page, because that makes it less confusing. But yeah, that's a really good example of what you want to try to do. So just make sure because sometimes it's a little bit of a stretch for students to find a theory that really fits. So if you're working on something, and Jenny, I'm sort of thinking about some of your stuff that some of it's physiologic. So if we're talking about physiologic changes, that can be the theory.
Okay.
Or, like in pediatrics, we do developmental theory. So kids, developmentally, they grow and mature, and it's a result of just getting older and developmentally progressing. That's an okay theory. So I don't want you to feel like you have to force fit like a nursing theory into this and try to find measures if it's not really what you want to do. So that's the other thing I wanted to say about theory. Questions about either the outline or the proposal?
So for the proposal, do we have just like to talk about one variable? And I mean, if we have like more than one variable to measure in this proposal, are we like supposed just to write about one, or we can like write about all of them?
I would have all of the measures for all of the variables that are in your research question. So that's a very good question, because you may, for your dissertation, have a couple of questions in mind. And for this assignment, you can keep it to one question, but typically there's at least one independent and one dependent variable, and then the, you know, the theory explaining that may bring in other variables. So, so you'll want at least the variables that are in your research question and in your theory. And as you're, you know, as I said, as you're working on the outline, to plug in as much of that as you can so that I can give you feedback on, you know, include this, add that. It just gives you a little additional help for that final paper.
Thanks.
Other questions on either the outline or the paper?
Dr. Cleveland, I have a question, but it's more around my project. And so I wonder if I should just take it offline with you as opposed to boring the rest of the students with my question about a measurement tool for a project versus a research study is very different.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can set up a time. Why don't you email me some good times?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, typically I can chat anytime on Fridays. Usually I try to work from home and we could set up a Zoom, but I have some other flexibility. So send me some times. Any other questions? As you're working on this, if something else comes to mind that you like, oh darn, I should have asked, or wish I would have known I needed to ask, just email me. I am going to be at the Academy meeting in DC from October 31st to November 2nd or 3rd. So I might have spotty kind of email. But otherwise I will be available. So just shoot me an email if questions come up.
Sounds good.
Anything else while we're chatting? All right, well, I'll look for your emails if something comes up. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to getting this first analysis assignment. I think you'll have fun with it. It's typically the students enjoy playing with some data. So good luck with that one, and I'll be looking forward to the paper outlines, and please let me know if you need something.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, see y'all.
Yeah.